I want to ask you a question really as a scientist, because I know that you do science, you think like a scientist, but you also have a more open-mindedness when it comes to, let's call it metaphysics or ideas of theology and so forth. But strictly from a scientific perspective, it seems to me that starting in the maybe 18th, 19th century with the paradigm of materialism, science took the certainty that we can derive in the clear sort of physical and chemical laws of nature and started applying those to metaphysics. And personally, I find there's no problem with a sort of agnosticism. Agnosticism, I find, is very compatible with the scientific method and with scientific ideas. But we seem to be dealing with more than that from material scientists. They have a tremendous amount of certainty about matters of metaphysics. They know it's this and it's not that. Is it possible for somebody who's really just a good faith scientist to really derive the same sort of certainty that they do with material laws with metaphysics? In other words, the origins of the cosmos. I know, for example, that Stephen Hawking took position that it would be very hard to do that because science is based on measurement, and we can't measure what existed by definition before the laws of nature and before matter existed and before energy existed. Is there a sort of a deeper philosophical problem for a scientist to make very certain claims about matters of metaphysics the way that a lot of mechanistic materialist scientists seem to be doing these days?
Yes, I think basically what they have is a dogmatic metaphysical system, but they don't realize that it's a metaphysical system. They think it's just the truth or the facts or something like that. Basically, the mechanistic view of nature, that nature is made of mindless matter governed by mathematical laws, developing in a purposeless way. That's the basic assumption of materialism, with no consciousness doing anything in the universe, is simply an assumption. It's a metaphysical assumption. And its historical origin, I think, it's helpful to see its historical origin because at the beginning of the 19th century, most scientists believed in Cartesian dualism, the idea that Descartes put forward in the 17th century that said there's two kinds of reality. There's material reality, which is extended in space, res extensa, extended things, which is unconscious and is matter, and that the whole of nature is nothing but res extensa, mindless, purposeless material. And then there's the realm of consciousness or spirit, which consists of God, angels, and human minds. And so it was the dualistic split. And in practice, it worked quite well for a while because it meant that scientists got the whole of nature as their domain, and they could function fairly independently of religion, whereas religion got God, angels, and human minds, including morality, as its domain, and could go on in that area without messing with science. Or basically what it did was desacralize the whole of nature and handed it over to science and kept religion into a restricted compartment. So in the 19th century, many philosophers thought that this dualism was not a very good idea, and basically instead of having two quite different things, you should just have one thing. They thought two was too many. So the materialists said, well, get rid of God, angels, and mysterious human minds that are not material, and then you've just got a materialist universe with no God, no angels, and no mind that's separate from the brain. Whereas the other school of thought, the idealists, said, well, get rid of the idea matter's the fundamental reality, say consciousness is the fundamental reality, then matter's kind of dumbed down mind. So then from thereafter, the materialists had the problem of explaining mind, and the idealists had the problem of explaining matter. But that's because they were reducing a dualism to a monism from two principles to one, because they thought two was too many. Personally, I think two is too few, and I think actually we need three fundamental principles, which we can come to later if you like. But so I think that this dogmatic materialism arose simply by cancelling out the whole realm of consciousness in order to, they thought, simplify things and get to a monistic materialism. And it's a purely metaphysical system. And so, although a lot of scientists say they're not interested in metaphysics or philosophy and it's a waste of time, they're actually deeply embedded in a metaphysical system without being aware of it, which is not a very good state to be in. You can't criticize assumptions if you don't know you've got them.